Welcome everyone to Admissions Live. We're having a little bit of audio trouble on the back end, so if you are tuning in live right now and you can tell me if you can hear me, go ahead and tweet with the Admissions Live hashtag to let me know if we're coming in clearly or not. But I'm going to get the show started anyway. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Admissions Live. This is the weekly web show for college admissions professionals. We're broadcasting live on the Higher Ed Live Network, a product of ED Universe Media. Tune into Admissions Live on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on higheredlive.com and join the conversation using the Twitter hashtag AdmissionsLive. I'm your host, Ashley Hennigan, and tonight I'm joined by Elizabeth Pabst, Customer Service Manager at Matchbox. And in just a moment, we're going to be chatting about surviving the admissions reading season, but we can't do that without first giving a shout out to the sponsors that make Admissions Live possible. And Admissions Live is sponsored by Zinch. Zinch has partnered with the Center for Student Opportunity to provide free professional development. Tune in for a free webinar tomorrow, January 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time for First Generation Focus, a webinar dedicated to resources and programs for first generation students as they navigate their college search and selection process. Email outreach at zinch.com, tweet at social admission, or visit zinch.com/webinars to sign up. And we just sent out a tweet with a link to that webinar. Admissions Live is sponsored by Welcome to College, where it's all about the visit. Welcome to College has helped students find colleges that are a fit for them and that campus that they can flourish at. They believe it's all in the visit and have created free web and mobile applications to plan, rate, share, and compare the entire college visit process. Parents and high school counselors can also create accounts to share their impressions. Check out Welcome to College today. All right, ready to get into this show. Again, my guest tonight is Elizabeth Pabst. She has admission experience from Boston University and Harvard. She's got college counseling experience from St. Paul Academy. And when she was in the thick of the review season, she was reviewing 2,000 applications annually, which is crazy town. She's got a master's in social science from the University of Chicago, and she's currently customer success manager at Matchbox. I'm really excited to have her on the show, and I'm going to bring her on right now. All right, so we are live and we're on camera. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on tonight. I'm really excited to talk about this because I am literally taking a break from reading applications myself. So our conversation, I hope, will help get me a little bit more centered and focused on what I'm supposed to be doing. But I want you to start by telling us a little bit more about your own background in admissions and college counseling.
Okay. So I've been at Matchbox for about a year now. Before that, I was in admissions and college counseling as well for about 6 years. I started at BU at Boston University pretty much right out of graduate school, and I was actually hired in the middle of December. So speaking of reading season, it was like, welcome and good luck because we don't have time to train you. They were wonderful, but it was just a crazy, crazy time of year. And it turns out that's a pretty good way to learn. So I worked at BU for 2 cycles and then moved on to Harvard. And just over the course of my time in both of those places, I really loved reading. As much as this time of year you sort of forget that you love reading, I really did enjoy it. And then when I went into college counseling, it was a lot of fun to work with students on the other side of the process, filling out those applications and working on those essays and all of that. Just sort of, we always use the expression, on the other side of the desk, but it was really neat to sort of see everything that goes into all of those applications that you sometimes wish were fewer when you're the reader. And so after that, St. Paul Academy actually was where I went to high school, so that was a fun experience to be there. Then I moved back to Boston and joined the Matchbox team, which has been a totally different sort of walk of life here, but a really great experience and neat to sort of be involved in admissions and still, I don't know, it was a world that I never really knew existed until I ended up here. So it's been neat to see admissions from a different angle.
Awesome. Well, it's certainly an area that needs innovators. So I'm excited to have you here to talk a little bit about what you're doing at Matchbox too. But I do want to set the stage a little bit for our viewers to help them kind of understand what's been going on in the college admissions world. In the past decade. So the state of college admissions right now, and if we're looking at the state of college admissions report that NACAC puts out, the college application process has been influenced by technology tenfold in the past 10 years. Applications per student have been rising dramatically, and so everyone is reading more. Applications have moved from paper to online, which has affected everything. It's one of the reasons why we're reading more applications. And in the past decade, oops, sorry, we've got a little notification over your face. In the past decade, 85% of applications have been moved online. So I'm sure those stragglers are catching up, and that almost everyone will be offering an online application in 2013. New technologies have also given us new kinds of ways to communicate with students, and probably most notedly are the admission notification portals that are popping up all over in different colleges. So lots of different experiences from the reading side and from the student side too, because of technology. So while before we get tackling these tips on how to survive reading season, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on at Matchbox and what you do there and how it relates to application reading?
All right. I'm only getting snippets of what you're saying, unfortunately, but I think you're asking me to tell you a little bit about Matchbox.
Yes.
So we're an iPad app company. So we're developing a whole suite of products for admissions, but currently the main use of Matchbox for our customers is reading on the iPad, and it's a whole app devoted to that, allowing our readers to read without being connected to the internet. So we're working to display all of their applications. We create scorecards that mimic their evaluation process. And then we enable them to do all of the reading really in the palm of their hand. So it's been really interesting for me to work with all of our customers, and that number has grown a lot just in the last year. We're a very small company. We were just founded in 2011. We were started at MIT by our founder, who was one of the readers there, and got enough interest from other schools that we became a company. But one of my favorite things about my job is that my primary role is working with the customers after they've signed on. So I get to learn about how all of these different schools read, how they evaluate applications. And my background is almost entirely in undergrad admissions, but we have a lot of graduate programs as customers as well. So that's been really fascinating for me to see, how are all of these different worlds doing admissions, and how can we help to make it more efficient and a little bit less painful, especially this time of year for the readers. So it's been really phenomenal and just fascinating for me as someone who's just sort of an admissions junkie, as I take it you are too. Yeah.
Yes, admissions and technology junkie. So I'm curious to hear more about Matchbox, but that's for another time. You recently published 7 tips for surviving reading season, and I'd love for you to share those with us tonight. If you have questions for Elizabeth, you can tweet at us using the Admissions Live hashtag. You can send those questions our way, but let's get started and hear what your tips are. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I'm hearing you a little better now.
Okay,
Thanks. So when I first drafted this, it was like, I had so many different ideas for all the things over the course of the years that I found helpful during this time of year. It's just sort of it's very solitary time, and it's a time when you just sort of have to really be self-aware and figure out what works best for you. But as I sort of went through the different cycles and talked with my colleagues and all of that, these are sort of the main themes that I landed on. So I guess I will just sort of jump right in. And the first one is to set your hours and schedule reading like a work day. And this, I think, is hugely important. I came, at least from my background, from schools where we were given a lot of freedom during this time of year. It was sort of like, you've got a ton of work to do. So if you need to do it at home, do it at home. If you want to do it at work, do it at work. If you want to do it, from 1 a.m. to 8 a.m., do it then, as long as you get it done. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, that amount of freedom can be almost overwhelming because there's so little structure. So one of my main tips is just to create that structure for yourself. No one's doing it for you, but it'll be really, really helpful. So for me, it was so critical for me to set an alarm and get up early and, have some applications under my belt by about 8 o'clock or so. And know that, when I took my breaks throughout the day, that I could look back and feel like I gotten some work done. If you were to sleep until noon and then, go to the gym or meet a friend or whatever, no one's stopping you from doing that, but then all of a sudden, you're panicked. So for me, just really kind of pretending like it was a regular day. Granted, I was still, in the sweatpants and stuff, and, those are some of the perks of being able to stay home. But the schedule for me was really important, and I think it helped me to stay on track.
Yeah, being able to read from home is such an advantage. I can really get in and focus when I'm out of the workplace, and I don't have people knocking on my door to do other things. So getting out of the office for me is really helpful, and I think I get the most reading done. Unfortunately, I don't get out of the office very often. So again, creating that schedule is really important for me so that I can say, okay, from this time I'm going to do this kind of work, and then from this time I'm going to read applications, and I'm only going to read applications then.
Right. Absolutely. I think equally important, to blocking at that time and starting early is setting an endpoint. I think some people just sort of read until they can't read anymore, and that is unsustainable. So I think, saying, I'm going to meet a friend at 7 o'clock for dinner and I'm going to read until I have to go, or something like that can be a good way to do it. Or things like staying active and all of that. I'm going to break at this time so I can go work out. But you got to know that there's an end in sight, or else it's just a mind game that is really, really daunting.
Yeah, absolutely. What's next?
So next is establish a pace to achieve your goals. And I think that's different for everybody. You mentioned I was reading, upwards of 2,000 applications in some of these reading cycles. And so that meant on an average day, I had to get through 50, 60, 70 in a day. And that was a lot. But, you just kind of have to figure out how to get it done. And also, I think, it's really important, as I mentioned before, to just be sort of self-aware. And you can't know this all right off the bat in your first reading season, but after, a month or so, you really get to a sense of what's realistic for you. And so I think setting goals and knowing that not every day you'll reach them, and some days you will crush them, it's helpful to have those sort of landmarks in your mind so that you can cruise and feel like you've got a sense of confidence as you're reading. I also think as you're setting that pace, it's good to think about, what am I going to break, and how can I look ahead so that it doesn't just seem like, this endless barrage of applications.
Yeah, I tend to set goals at the beginning of each week. And early in the application reading season, I can say, I only need to read 10 applications a day to meet my goal. But then about this time of year, I need to read 40 applications a day. So something happened there where I didn't read on days. But just kind of checking in every week to make sure I'm on track for that goal. And establishing a pace is a really good way to put it, because you can feel like you're getting through things, even though that end point is very far away. You're on track to get it done.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's important to remember that every once in a while you'll read 10 applications in a row that go really quickly, and then you'll hit number 11 and it'll take you an hour. There's no predicting it, so you can't beat yourself up for that, but to sort of be able to look look ahead at your day and look back on, the last few and say, this is sort of what is reasonable for me to expect of myself, I think is a really healthy way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, what do we have next? What's number 3?
Number 3, not totally different from the last 2, but unique in its own way, is create a reading day routine. And for me, I think, not to be confused with the schedule, but the routine is really how am I breaking down all of this work. And to me, that has a lot to do with scheduling breaks, looking at, reading. Instead of looking at your day as I have to read 50 applications today, think of it as I have to read, 5 groups of 10 or 10 groups of 5 or, whatever seems to be a little bit less overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And then break up the time, run around the block, eat some lunch. I think there's so many things that's so easy during this time of year to, forget to eat or to eat M&Ms and nothing else, or, to really sort of neglect other parts of your life and to be able to say, okay, I'm gonna read these 5 and then I'm gonna, go do my laundry and then I'm gonna read these 5 and keep going. You're just recharging, and I think that's important, and it's also good to clear your head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I like to do is read an app and then check Twitter because I'm a social media person and I like to think that I'm not missing out on other things. So whether it's if Twitter's your thing or if it's your Google Reader or whatever you like to keep up on, check in, just see what's going on, then get back, and then I feel like I actually see more on Twitter during application reading season because I'm checking and glancing more. But it's a nice kind of habit to be into, and I feel like I'm multitasking. So that's my routine, I guess.
Yeah, I think whatever works, whatever sort of keeps you motivated. And it's those little types of rewards that aren't really going to disrupt your day, but are enough to sort of recharge you that I think are really helpful.
Cool. What do we have for number 4?
Number 4 is get in the zone by eliminating all distractions. And the sort of the classic example that I think of and that was included in this is one year when I was working at Harvard and I had a studio apartment, and it was basically one room and then there was a little kitchen. And when you only have one room in your apartment, it's full of every possible distraction in your life. So I took my one sort of comfy chair and I moved it right into the kitchen. And that was where I read the vast majority of my applications that year, because I was just able to physically remove myself from things like, my DVR, my computer, all the chores that needed to be done and all that stuff. So I think that's just important. It's just, for me, I know that I easily fall prey to temptations like that. And some people have more self-control than I do, but I knew myself well enough to know that I might as well just relocate. So I think, obviously this will vary from office to office, but I think it's great to get out of your house too, or out of your office if possible. Mm-hmm. Maybe do some reading if you can do so, obviously in a pretty, confidential way, in a library or in, the back corner of a coffee shop or something like that. It helps to make you feel like you haven't completely lost touch with the whole world. And sometimes those types of spaces are less distracting too, because it's not your responsibility to be making the lattes or reshelving the books. It's just a nice way to sort of feel connected with the world, but still be focused on your work.
Yeah, eliminating distractions is probably the most difficult one for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it helps for me to be out of the office and to be at home. I could care less if I have dirty dishes in the sink. But if I have a stack of other work in front of me on my desk, that'll drive me nuts. So that helps me a lot. But being able to go out to a coffee shop and read apps or go somewhere else is great. And fortunately, my reading is available online, and I can do that. But I could see where it would be very handy to have an iPad wherever I went, my handy Matchbox app to read. If we were all be so fortunate to have that, it would be great.
Absolutely. I think even when you're at work, I used to just go into a conference room just to remove myself from the distractions of my own personal office too. So there are ways to get around it, and I think that again, it just comes down to knowing yourself and what's going to work. And if you are one like me, then it's good to go in another room.
Great. What's up for number 5?
Number 5 is organize your applications to provide context. And for me, if I could just pick one of all 7 tips, this would be it. Because I think it is not only helpful for getting through your work, but it also makes you a better reader. So, it'll vary a bit from school to school in the way that your office is split up. But we always, in my experience, I was responsible for different geographic areas, and so reading in high school groups was absolutely critical for me. It helped so much to, I mentioned earlier, devising a rhythm or a pace. And when you're reading in high school groups, you really get sort of in the zone of that particular high school while you're reading. And how many APs are offered, and what the name of their pre-calc courses. That sounds nothing like pre-calc. And you get to know, which teachers write, which types of recommendations and all those types of things. And so that, I think, makes you much more able to pick up on nuances and sort of all of those little things that you might overlook otherwise. And it also means that you can really, really cruise. You can really get through those applications more quickly because you don't have to keep referring, to the scattergram of the grade distribution. You can sort of have that in the back of your mind and keep working. So whether you're breaking it down into high school groups or majors or, particular school students that are coming from particular undergrad institutions or in the grad world or particular employers. I think that is just so incredibly helpful and important to doing good work. So that to me, I think is really critical.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how I would do it. I actually don't know how, well, I do. I work in differential admission, so we have a different admission standard for all of our different majors. And fortunately, we're not broken up by geographic area. We're broken up by the major itself. So I can think about that one set of qualifications that student is going to need to be admitted, and not have to jump from admission standard to admission standard in the geographic area. So for me, it's I'm going to read the art kids today and get in that artsy kind of mood, and tomorrow I'm going to do the pre-med students and think about things that way. But context, absolutely. I would agree with you that this was a really important tip. If you don't have this down yet, this will save you.
Yeah. I think it's really helpful to get to know, just sort of like you said, you're getting to know the requirements, you're getting to just be in the mindset of all those factors that are so important, and it just makes you a better reader. I just think it is so helpful, and it's so helpful for efficiency too. So yeah.
Great. We've got 2 more, and number 6.
Number 6 is don't be afraid to ask for help. And, I think this is particularly important when you are a newbie and you're sort of getting the hang of things, whether you're new to admissions or you're new to the school where you're working. There are idiosyncrasies of every place and every process. And, you should never hesitate to ask questions. And, a lot, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of these schools are experiencing volume that they've never experienced before. And so I think sometimes it's easy to feel like you're going to be, sort of nagging someone if you ask a colleague a question or pick up your phone or something. But, the bottom line is nobody wins if you're just guessing. So I think it's just really important to feel like you're asking those questions. At the same time, maybe you don't need to ask them all at once. Maybe you set aside some time, one of the breaks that we talked about, to craft an email to a colleague and say, I've collected these questions over the last few hours, any tips, that kind of thing. But I think, a lot of where I came up with these types of tips was in talking to people once I had already become a little bit more sort of established in how I approached the season, and listening to the questions that they were asking, because it turns out that we're all having the same questions. So I think it's always helpful to just get that dialogue going.
Yeah, and I have to say, asking for help is extra important if you're not going to meet your goal. And that can be very scary if especially if you're new, or even if you're not and you've gotten other responsibilities that have piled up, and all of a sudden you have a deadline, and without totally killing yourself and just reading 24/7, there's no way you're going to meet that goal. It's okay to ask for help, and the sooner you ask for help, the better it is for everyone. But you might have a colleague who flew through apps and can pick up some of that work. And that happens on my staff all of the time. There's always, one major that was more popular than others this year, and there was unanticipated volumes, and it's okay to kind of share that around. But if you don't speak up, someone's not going to be watching your volumes to make sure that you're hitting your goal. They're just going to expect that you are, unless you ask for help. So that's a really important one. Again, not to be afraid to ask for help is the big point there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Great. So one more,
and this is sort of in the same vein. It's read with your phone nearby. Whether you're at home or at the office or at a coffee shop, I think this is really important, not just to ask questions of your colleagues, but to ask questions and dig a little deeper as you read through applications. I think, while in the moment of actually reading an application, what better time if you have a question about that application to call, the guidance counselor, to call the teacher who wrote the letter that seems that they might be wanting to tell you something but not put it in writing, those types of scenarios. And I think, this process, as you mentioned, with volume increasing everywhere, and with schools all over the place being overwhelmed, and not just on the college side, but on the secondary school side, it seems almost anonymous sometimes, I think, with the volume that we're all dealing with. But what I found is that by making that human connection and saying, I'm sorry to bother you, guidance counselor who's responsible for 600 students, but just if you have 2 minutes, I'm noticing that this student is interested in, foreign languages, but doesn't seem to be taking one. What's the deal? Those can be really helpful conversations, and they tend to really help build rapport and help build a nice relationship with those schools, so that I think, going forward, they'll go, I really have confidence that the admissions office at, wherever you're working is taking the time to ask those important questions and to really read thoughtfully. So if you're sort of building connections and doing good work at the same time, I think it is absolutely worth, the 90 seconds that it might take for you to take a break. And likewise, if you were to save up all those questions and call, tomorrow, then it's going to take that much longer, because you're going to have to go back to all of those applications and refer to them again.
Right. And that's another difficult one for me. Not put the application on hold to call later, or to figure that out later and go on and read someone that I can get through, to actually take the time and to pick up the phone and to hope that the counselor answers. I think it's when you're in that groove, you get a little worried about stopping and kind of killing your pace. But if you think about that ahead of time, that you are going to have to stop and make some calls and really figure things out, and in your own mindset, that's part of reading. I think I would be more comfortable in kind of pausing, having a nice conversation, and moving on.
This can be really sort of like when we talked about sort of recharging. Those can be really nice conversations to remind you why it is that you're going crazy right now. Why it is that you're reading all the time and feeling less social than you want to be, and all of that. It's nice to sort of have that conversation about that awesome student whose application you're reading, or right. All of those different scenarios that go into this process.
Right. Great. So like so many parts of our roles as admissions counselors, it's important to maintain this work-life balance. And so I've adopted many of your tips, and they really do help me work efficiently. Hopefully I will get better at a few of these others, but I think this is a great reference for anyone that's new or anyone like me that needs a refresher on what I'm supposed to be doing and how I should be keeping track of things. So I was so thrilled to see her slide share go up, and I'm glad we could put this together so quickly because I think it is really timely to have this conversation right now. I'll just add a few tips of my own really quickly, and if any viewers have tips to share, if you want to tweet at us with the Admissions Live hashtag, go ahead and do that for us. My tips are to stay hydrated and take stretch breaks. I could use one right now. I've got a crick in my back, but I tend to get really tired looking at a screen, and a lot of the time it's just because I'm not drinking enough water. Also, reward yourself for a job well done. I think everyone in my office has a secret snack that they bring out during admission season. That's their little reward. I try not to do the snack thing because I get enough snacks during travel season. But rewarding yourself for a job well done, even if you don't meet your goal. So no matter what, do something nice for yourself. And then I always like to remind myself that spring travel is right around the corner and that I might be all cooped up right now. But that's one of the beauties of the admissions role is that it changes with the season, and soon enough you will not be at a desk. You don't even know what your desk looks like anymore, and you'll be hitting the road for spring travel very, very soon. So those are my quick tips.
To add to that, I think April for me was always one of my favorite months. It's so busy, but to actually get to meet some of the students whose applications you've read and see how excited they are, and I think that was just so rewarding to have that to look forward to at the end of all of this work.
Definitely, yeah. And soon enough, those acceptance letters are out the door, and you're having those friendly conversations and those excited conversations with the students, and so that is incredibly rewarding. We often have to remind yourself that those good things are at the end of all of the really hard work. So before we wrap up, can you just share a little bit of contact information for our viewers that want to hang out with their iPad and read applications rather than whatever they're doing right now? Can you just share how we can get in contact with you and other folks at Matchbox?
Sure. So the Matchbox website is Matchbox, just like the cars, matchbox.net though. And my email address is epabst. So EPABST @matchbox.net. So if anyone is at all interested in learning more, we'd be happy to talk with you and share a demo with you and let you know what this is all about.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again so much for coming on. I always try to make it to the 7:35 mark on our show, and we are perfect timing tonight. So I'm going to close and wrap up. I want to thank Elizabeth again for coming on and joining our show. You can watch more shows from Admissions Pros like Elizabeth on Admissions Live, and they're all archived on higheredlive.com. So thanks for everyone who tuned in live, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.